Welcome to Calm Your Crazy. This is episode 6 on reclaiming yourself. Next week, we're going to talk about manifesting, how that you're doing that automatically in your life, how you're doing it every day, and how you can change it to create the life that you want. Thank you for being here. I'm Kiana Lambert, and this is Calm Your Crazy. Okay, today we're talking about reclaiming yourself, how childhood trauma, especially having a narcissistic parent, like I did, 2 of them, fractures your sense of self and how to heal from that. Last time we talked about healing wounds and stepping into authorship, and this episode is about those wounds, what they do to our sense of self, and how to get it back. Now, what does a narcissistic parent do to a child's sense of self? Well, in my case, my mother made me feel like nothing. No matter what I did, if I took something to her, I was always so critical of it. She denied my sense of reality. She denied my sense of self. Everything was dependent on how she felt about me. I could never be skinnier than her. I could never be more successful than her. It didn't matter that I had 3 degrees. I told her at one time I wanted to go work for the UN, and she was like, "You can't do that. You can't do that." I created a course on off-grid living, and I spent so much time on it, and I was so proud of it, and I showed it to her, and she was like, no, it's not good. It was constant criticism and no love. There was no love growing up. There was no cuddling with me and my siblings. It was just yelling and screaming, and if we were supposed to spend time together, she was always on the phone, and we were just treated like an accessory. She and my father both acted like they owned us, that we were property. It didn't matter how intelligent we were. It didn't matter how many times we told them they were wrong, or we tried to quote psychiatry or all the other things that we went to school for. We could never be smarter than them. They always knew everything. We could never confront them with how we felt, because they would just get angry and scream and yell and talk about how their wound made them that way. So, it fractures your identity. It takes away your sense of self, and it creates a reality for you based on their distortion, based on their lies that they're unable to confront. For example, my mom was into sex work in the cult. She trafficked me when I was little. I'm not sure if my siblings were, but I remember that I was. So, it's hard to come back from that, knowing that you sold yourself for sex work in a cult. So she and my father told us to tell everybody that we were missionaries doing God's work, which wasn't true. So then they told us not to lie, but at the same time they were telling us to lie. So it fractures this child, my inner child, and it creates a programming in your brain that tells you that life is not true, that you can see reality, but it's not okay to react to it, that you can have a reality that you see, and it's not true, because you don't have a foundation of yourself. You don't know who you are, you don't know what boundaries to set, and it's all because of the wounds that your parents gave you. So, what do you do as a child? What do you do as an adult? Well, you start to suppress your authenticity. You start to suppress the authentic feelings that you have to avoid the rejection, the anger, and the core wound that it created that you carry with you is unworthiness, shame, lies about yourself. Because you can't trust yourself, because every time you went to the person that was supposed to tell you and confirm your reality and say, yeah, you did a good job, you're amazing, I love you, always said, no, this is shit. This is not good. This is not good enough. So the lies are created that you're not good enough, and that everything that you need to do is dependent on their approval. And so you go your entire life trying to get approval from authority figures, approval from your parents. Meanwhile, you're sabotaging yourself and saying you're not good enough. So you can take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and it really affects your momentum in moving forward. It also makes you really unsure of your gut. We are animals. We have gut instincts. We have vibration and frequency that we can feel. And when you have ADHD and when you have traumatic childhood, you're highly sensitive. So not only are you highly sensitive and you can tell what's wrong, but because of the way that your wound is and because of the abuse, your brain doesn't trust it. So you go through your life unsure of what to do. Unsure of decisions to make, unsure if that's your gut or your head, and you are unsure if that's your head or your heart because you have a fractured sense of self. And it affects the way that you render your reality. It affects the way that you bend time-space to create your manifestation because of you. It's a mismatch between the lie that you've created because of the way you were treated and your body that knows the truth. Okay? So basically, my parents, their needs always came first. I learned to disappear. I learned to push down my opinions, my wounds, unless we were fighting. And it caused disease because I learned that I had to suppress everything. So I continued to suppress everything growing up. And I continued to suppress everything as an adult. Every job that was terrible, every boss, every bully, every friend that treated me like shit, I suppressed it because I thought I was the problem. So I suppressed it and took this stuff, and it became disease in my body. Diabetes, high blood pressure, hypothyroidism, thyroid disease, and childhood PTSD, anxiety. It is everything that comes up is all because of that suppression. Other ways that it affects you other than just disease is when your amygdala is so big because you've been abused as a child, everything is super sensitive. And they call it empathy or an empath, and I do believe that some of that is your spirit coming through as well. But a lot of it is biologically your amygdala. It's very big and you can sense everything in the room. So you often absorb other people's emotions and you're not sure which is yours and which is theirs. Because you have that fractured sense of self. You have that wound that didn't confirm who you are. It didn't give you safety. So it's hard to walk through life not knowing what your emotions are or what you're picking up from other people. And it makes things difficult as you try to navigate even safety and boundaries with other people. It really affects you. But it doesn't have to be that way anymore, which is why we are doing this whole shebang. Because if I can heal from it, you can heal from it. And step number motherfucking 1 is to start reclaiming yourself. And the way you do that is you have to get away from the people that did this to you. I remember sitting there and speaking to my mother, and she was talking about one of the kids in the cult, and we lived with them in Chile. This kid had a blood disease, and he would bruise really easily, which now that, went to school and, was in the medical industry for so long, he was, we were all malnourished from being in the cult and not having food. And so he had disease from that. Anyway, they couldn't spank him because he would bruise so easily, unfortunately for them. They lamented about it all the time. I remember his parents would always lament that they couldn't spank him. So what his father would do was take him and shake him upside down. Now, the whole home was always chaos. Everybody was always fighting all the time. And that's just a little sidebar, too, is that when you grow up in chaos, when they run your brain scans, they're identical to the ones of men that have come back from war. That's what happens to children when they live in chaos. They get PTSD, and it looks just like the scans of brains that have come back from war. So anyway, that's just a little interesting tidbit for you. But they would shake him upside down, and I remember my mother saying that this particular kid no longer spoke to his parents, that she happened upon his parents in the social media scene and they were talking, and this kid no longer talks to them. He lives and considers his aunt and uncle his parents and has completely disowned them, and his aunt and uncle have adopted them as his. And she just could not understand why this would happen. Why would he not speak to his parents anymore? And I looked at her and I was like, are you kidding me right now? And of course, in true narcissistic fashion, they can't ever, get any confrontation because that might fracture their sense of self. So she was like, okay, no. And I remember thinking that I never thought that was an option either. I never thought it was an option to go no contact. So after my NDE, and I saw how everything was connected and everything happens for a reason, and I felt love for them despite what they had done to me. And I told her, I love you no matter what. I see how everything happened for a reason. And she said I was crazy for saying that. I mean, for telling her I loved her and saying that I saw all these things. And this is coming from the same woman who, told me she went to the bathroom one night and saw a leprechaun on her toilet paper. So that's a perfect example of how narcissism works. It's okay for her to have psychosis and schizophrenia, things like seeing or hearing stuff. I mean, this woman believes that Sasquatch is responsible for everything. If she locks her keys in the car, it's Sasquatch. If she forgets something, it's Sasquatch. If she loses something, it's Sasquatch. So it's an example of how you are unable to face your own reality. But even more interesting was when I gave her unconditional love, she called me crazy because I realized in that moment that she could not give herself unconditional love. But it also made me realize that the reason that I was the way that I was because of her and my father, of the childhood. So I went no contact, and it was the best thing I have ever done for myself. I went no contact with them, and then a year ago I went no contact with my aunt and uncle and their children because of their toxic behavior and their toxic patterns, and also because in somatic therapy a lot of memories came up, and they were complicit in my trafficking. They were complicit in what happened to me as a child, and knowing that and knowing the abuse that occurred to my brothers at the hands of my uncle made me unable to continue that relationship. See, when you step away from people who fracture your reality and abuse you, and you go to therapy, I was doing somatic therapy, and you calm your body and you start to heal, memories come up, they surface, and they're hard. And it was extremely difficult for me. It has taken me 4 years. And not only just 4 years of dealing with that, but dealing with my health, my mental health, and my physical health. But I had to step away from them, and that was step number 1. Step number 2 was admitting to myself that they had fucked it up, that they had fucked me up, that they had fucked my siblings up, and they had fucked my life up by proxy. And that was really painful and hard to admit, that they were the reason, because I love them, right? We love our family. Even if they hurt us, we still love them. And we've spent our entire childhood and our entire half of our lives thinking that we were the problem. So to admit to ourselves and to see that we aren't the problem, and the problem was the people that loved us didn't, is hard. It is so hard. It is unbelievable. Like the grief that I had to go through. The amount of pain in my body that was sitting there with that was so hard to go through. But I cannot tell you, I felt so much better once that was over. Once I burned through it, once I grieved it, once my body adjusted to it, once my nervous system adjusted to it, I felt relief like nobody's business. I felt my inner child come out like a flower, free. Because it wasn't my fault anymore. I didn't do that to me. They did. And I put that shame back where it belonged. I also had to grieve how this made me attract partners in my life that mirrored those wounds. Because your inner self is what projects into the outer world. And your inner self and where you are in your frequency and vibration is going to attract other people in frequency and vibration. So I attracted people that were conditional, just like my parents, that were narcissistic, just like my mother. My friends, my girlfriends, narcissistic, just like my mother, using, and one of them that I considered my closest friend, just, she didn't do sex work, but she just had sex with everybody. I mean, there was no discrimination. It was just constant. I learned from her sister that it started from when she was a young teen and going into truck stops and selling her body for money, and then it continued on into her adulthood with her partners. And I didn't judge her for it because I thought she was expressing herself, until later I figured out it was a wound from childhood, and she kept expressing it through abandonment of herself and her body. So I had to grieve that. I had to grieve that my vibration and my frequency was where it was because of my childhood. But here's where you turn it around, and here's where I turned it around. I started to look at my life not as just through the lens of the wound, but what did the wound give me? The wound gave me resilience. The wound made my brain special. From the time that I was a little girl, I never stopped. I remember falling on over and over and over again trying to ride a bike. We were in Chile. We didn't have bikes that were our size. I could barely get onto this bike. It was so big. But once I got on the seat, I could pedal. And once I started pedaling, I could gain balance. And the place that we lived had a little gazebo, and I would go out there to escape. And it was in the middle of a field, and it was a little glassed-in gazebo, and I would take my bike, and I would just ride in circles. I would fall, I would bruise. I have bruises and scars up and down my body from doing so much as a child. But I would continue to go until I could just hop on that huge bike, being 8 years old, an adult bike, and being 8 and being able to ride it. I did that with everything. My parents did not teach us school. They handed us a super workbook and told us to work. And then as teenagers, and middle school kids, we weren't allowed to go to school. We weren't allowed to do anything but sit at home. They woke us up in the morning, fed us breakfast. It was like we were cattle. We weren't cared for. We were just surviving, fed food, yelled at, and had network TV. So I taught myself. I didn't have anyone telling me or shaming me. I didn't have society telling me or shaming me that failure was bad. No, I failed over and over again. I tried to go to community college at 16. 16 because that's when I graduated. Because we had school all year round. So I went through all the super workbooks until super workbook number 12, and then you're graduated. So I tried to go to college, community college, and I failed over and over and over again. I would get jobs and fail. Because you didn't get the job, I would consider that failure. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter what was happening to me. I continued to go. I had a head like a rock, and nobody told me that I couldn't do it. And what was driving me as a young person was trying to discover everything, because my brain was so open, so big from trauma. Because trauma opens your brain. And my brain was so open from trauma. And I should say that it's not the only way to open your brain. It's a two-way street. So if it opens with trauma, it opens with love. But mine was trauma. So it was big and it was open, and I saw things, and I knew how the universe worked, and I had an inner knowing because I was all alone. And when you go through so much all alone, you get this sense of spirit, and you get this sense of self-worth inside that's deeper, and it is the core of you. And I had that. And it didn't matter how many times I failed. I went for it. I continued to go. So I had to recognize that my wounds gave me superpowers. because I have 3 degrees now. I have a master's degree in healthcare administration that I worked at the same time as I got a new job being an administrator for a big company. I took 18 hours of college for my bachelor's degree while I was taking care of kids and working full time. I learned so much, and it was because I was running. It was because it was hard to sit with my body, and I had no idea what was going on. I was constantly under hyper surveillance of my world, and that hyper surveillance made me feel like I was always in danger, and I always needed to run. But the running made me accomplish so much and gave me so many skills. And that's what I revert back to whenever I need to reclaim myself, whenever I need to remind myself who I am, remind myself what I've done. I am not perfect, and neither is anyone else. But I can sit here and say, I may have not been the best mom, but you know what? I was better than my mother. I cuddled my kids. Whenever I make a mistake, I sit with them and I own up to it, and we talk about it. And that stops generational trauma with me. It also shows my kids that I am capable of change. So I can take those wins. I can also see that everything that happened had a reason. And everything that I've learned along the way was for now. So that I could heal. And I could reach those in my frequency and vibration so that they can heal too. Because too many of us have been here. Too many of us have had to live like this. And yes, it doesn't matter what degree your trauma is in. It doesn't matter if, oh, yours was worse than mine, or mine was worse than yours, or yours is not as bad as other people's. It does not matter. Your brain doesn't know the difference. If I saw a scan of PTSD and a scan of PTSD, they're both PTSD. It doesn't distinguish. It's not PTSD level 1. It's not PTSD level 2. It's not it's not a competition. But we need to heal because we have shit to do. I have skills that I got from learning how to teach myself. I edit this podcast. I put it on Spotify. I put it on all the channels. If I don't know how to do something, I can sit there and my brain will figure it out, and I will figure it out. I created my own website. I'm creating a store. I'm writing. My whole master's degree, all of it was just research and writing, research and writing, research and writing. 3 years of research and writing. So I know how to do research and writing. But I wouldn't have had that if I didn't have the drive to do something. Now, it wasn't the drive of what I wanted to do. I wanted to sing and act and be really creative. And I can still do that. Sorry, my neighbors are really loud. And I can still do that, and I plan to still do that. But the skills that I learned were for this moment. And it is because of my childhood. And I firmly believe that you have these wins too. That you have things that you can look back on and say, I did that. And I did that because of my wound. And I did that because of my trauma. Because it's a two-way street. Everything is a two-way street. Everything. No ifs, ands, or buts. This universe is math. There's a positive and a negative. So that means that you have a two-way street every single time. So if you want to sit in the wound, you can sit in the wound. If you want to see where the wound helped you, you can see where the wound helped you. Most of us have trouble recovering because we sit in the wound and we don't get out of it. What traps people the most is sitting in their wound. And it's okay to sit in your wound. It's okay to grieve. I sat in the wound and I grieved. But you have to get out of it and see both sides. You have to get that 360 view. Because the wound is only half the story. You are the rest of it. You have things you still need to do. And you can't let the wound win. Because you know what? The wound is coming from other wounds. If your parents had the parents they needed to have, if their parents had the parents they needed to have, if society wasn't so stressful and you had both sets of parents and one wasn't always absent because, you had to make money in order to live. If society was built for you, then you wouldn't have these wounds. So you can't sit in the wound because there is no winning in the wound. There is no winning. The wound came from another wound that came from another wound that came from another wound. When does the wound stop? And what's keeping you from doing the things that you want and what's keeping you from living the life you want is sitting in that wound. And when you sit in the wound, you keep hurting yourself. And if you don't get out and start to try, then your brain and your nervous system are always going to be in the wound. So you have to literally push it out. And that starts by saying, hey, I did this. Even if you didn't get the degrees, even if you didn't do all this stuff that I did, you're still alive and you made it through. That is the biggest win. Do you think when I die, anyone's going to be like, oh, she had a master's in healthcare administration and she did it while she was an administrator? Nobody gives a fuck. Nobody. All they know is that I lived and I died. So your biggest win is that you are still alive. Your biggest win is that you still have something to do. And you know what it is, or else you still wouldn't be fighting. Because inside, you have something to do. You have somebody you wanted to be, and it is time for that to come out. So what you need to do is step away. We're going to recap here. You need to step away from the people that hurt you. You need to accept that they hurt you. You need to put that shame and that wound back on them. And then you need to start validating yourself by saying, yes, I survived it. I survived it. And now I'm going to continue to thrive and live. Because from this point forward, you're not going to tell yourself anymore that you're the wound. You're not going to tell yourself that. Because every time you hear it in your brain, you are going to correct it. That is an old wound. That is not who I am. And you need to recognize, you don't fight. The biggest mistake I see with people is saying, oh, fight the words, fight the voice in here. You do not fight. That's you. Why are you fighting you? Those things are coming up so that you can hug them. When they say you're not good enough, that's your little self that wasn't validated, and you say, it's okay, baby. I get it. That's the wound. And that's you stepping into your own authorship and your own spirit and outside the wound. When you can step outside the wound and you can say, I see you, baby. I see you. It's okay. That is the wound. That should never have happened to you. When things come up, whenever you have racing thoughts, it's because they want to be heard. So acknowledge them. Yep. Never should have happened to you. Yep. That person was an asshole. Yep. That person was abusive. Yep. You need to validate the shit out of your motherfucking self. Over and over and over again. And because you've cut off the people that didn't validate you, now you have your own voice that you can hear. Now you have your own voice that you can listen to. And you can step outside the wound and you can validate that little self. The more that you validate yourself, the more that your brain rewires, the more that your body feels safe with you, the more memories that are coming up, the more you can handle them, the more that you can sit there with things, and the more confident you will get. When you can sit there with the pain in your body, when you can grieve and not feel horrible and shame, that's when the healing happens. When you let it. Because your brain and your nervous system say, oh, we made it through all that pain and we are still alive. And we're stronger now. Every single time you validate yourself, you're reparenting yourself. Every single time you listen to the racing thoughts and you validate them, you are validating that small child. When you validate them, when you grieve, it threads yourself back together. And you can start to actually feel like a complete person. The best part of healing and reclaiming yourself is to be able to be present. Because when you are fractured, you are not present. I spent my entire life not being present. I always felt like I was looking through windows in a house, watching my life happen instead of actually being in it, because I wasn't in my body. I was dissociated from all the pain that I had stored in it. So now that I'm healing, I have memories coming up from my kids' birthdays, from outings, from family things that I missed. And I can feel them for the first time. And if I close my eyes, it's like I'm there all over again. But would I have preferred to be there in the first place? Yes. And do I deserve to be there going forward? Yes. Do you? Yes. I don't care who you are, what you've done. You deserve peace, happiness, and love. And the way that you get it is reclaiming yourself and healing and sitting with it, because you are worth it and you have shit to do. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me. I just finished my quantum healing book and workbook, and I'm looking for a dropship publisher, and I'm going to put it on Amazon and Apple. And I have another 48,000 word book, Power Over Anxiety, that I'm still finishing, and I have a ton of free stuff on manifestation that I'm going to put out on the website. And it's just me. I've been healing, taking care of my kids, and doing this at the same time. And every day is a win. Every day you have a win. And this is a win for me. So, my mission is to live authentically and help you do the same through healing and fucking those wounds over and taking back who we are. Love you, Nina.